So, what we want to do at the end of today's class is to be able to talk about the reasons why a business would trade internationally, why it would choose to launch in a foreign market, and why countries would want that as well. It's a complicated story. Canada in 1988 had a free trade agreement with the US because they were our biggest trading partner. It was expanded in 93 to include Mexico and become part of NAFTA. But when Donald Trump took over, he wanted to renegotiate it, and after a 2-year period, the US Mexico Canada agreement was signed. Likewise, Canada had spent years negotiating an agreement with Europe. This would have been a great deal for Canada. It would give access to the UK, to France, to all the companies and citizens in the European market. But when the UK voted for Brexit, things were in jeopardy. So another theme of today's class is just these international agreements are very, very complicated and very, very dynamic. They can change easily. So Canada is a developed country, so we produce a lot of goods. We also have workers, for example, in technology or finance, who are very skilled, who could be employed around the world. A sensible reason to trade is to sell what we make or sell some of our services, and also we're a very large country with natural resources, to sell some of those natural resources and use those to acquire the consumer goods and some of the other raw materials that we need. And so with there's only 38 million people in Canada, trading around the world helps Canadian businesses get access to markets 200 times larger than the domestic market within their own country. So, Canada's largest trading partner is the United States. So, any company that succeeds in Canada will first think to launch in the US because it's so close, and also instantly you get access to a market 10 times as large. Whereas Canada's is very geographically distributed along the Canada-US border. Most of the United States, especially the eastern US, is very, very compact. So it's quite easy logistically to ship into the United States and access a much bigger market. Here are some examples of what we sell and buy from the United States. So that sort of shows just an agriculture, how things are so connected. Something might be grown in Canada, processed in the United States, and sold back to Canada, like the example of wheat that they gave. They mentioned the different growing seasons, the different climates. So, wheat, uh, you know, in soy, in Canada, being traded for fruits and vegetables from the United States, how machinery can be made in the United States and then traded to Canada. And so they're so close. The supply chains are integrated, meaning that when an item is being made, it can easily go back and forth across the border, and that there's common standards and common safety requirements. So it really makes for a good trading partner. And there's a trade in energy. There's trade in automotive products. Agriculture is just one example, but I liked how that video sort of summarized things very quickly. So, what are the main benefits for business? So, this would be an important slide. Okay, well, you get access to markets. Just by that, we mean more people. You could get cheaper labor. Parts of the world that have cheaper labor than Canada. So, for lower skilled work, you might choose to outsource it to another part of the world. You can get an increased quality of goods because another part of the world might be an expert at that type of product. So you can seek out the most qualified person to make your product. You just get more goods because you're engaging more factories, and you get access to natural resources that are not available in your own country. So iPhones are a U.S. product, but they're made in Korea. They're sold in Hong Kong, so it's just as popular there as it is in other parts of the world. So those benefits in detail. So access to market, more customers, new partners. You would get to increase your sales, expand the company. It's the same reason that once a store opens up a second location to get access to more customers and increase their sales. Likewise, we're doing the very complicated equivalent of opening up in another country, so that access to markets and new partners and new governments and new dollars is very important. Uh, Sometimes it's done because the domestic market is too competitive. It's hard to make a big splash in the domestic market, so you may choose to enter a foreign market where there's a greater opportunity to succeed. So, um, Ballard Power Systems, we mentioned their fuel cells. It's kind of there's not enough fuel cell use in Canada right now for Ballard Power Systems to be totally profitable. So it needs to find partners around the world, and because there's many buses in China. Ballard Power Systems can sell a lot of fewer cells, despite the fact that it totally has not caught on in Canada yet. So, cheaper labor. Wages are lower in other parts of the world, and we say outsourcing or offshoring when we say move the production to another part of the world. And if you lower the cost of labor, you can lower prices and keep the profits for yourself. So, it's a very cynical reason, but it's definitely one that's prevalent. And, if we were to compare, um, wages in China over the last 10 years, they've even spiked, and manufacturing is moving even more to Mexico because even China's wages are becoming higher. You'll recall when Donald Trump was running for election the first time, he was talking about all the jobs that had moved to Mexico. Well, the primary reason was just the lower wage in Mexico than in the United States. So you can get access to new technology, new skilled workers, maybe a new method, a new innovation, and higher productivity. So Google, US company, their phones made by HTC in Taiwan because that's where they can sell it. They can get a low cost and they can get the higher quality. The alternative would have been for Google to design its own production factory. That could have been risky. They might have spent all that money and it still might not have been as good as the established HTC one. So there's an example of how partnering overseas allows you to cheaply increase quality. Just quantity. If it can be sold around the world, get more, more money. We talk about economies of sales, of scale. So economy of scale. The more of an item you make, the more efficient you become, and you can lower the price per unit. So if you're selling products around the world, you can ramp up production and lower costs. Also, you might not have the ability to say open a second plant in Canada, but if you open a branch plant in a developing country, that might be cheaper. That allows you to increase the quantity of what's being produced. So, Hyundai is from South Korea, and they've been targeting sales in the United States and China, and it's just gone up exponentially. So South Korea is a small country. There's only so many car customers in there. So by going to China, by going to the U.S., you get more possibility of sales. So access to resources, because of the climate, the precipitation, the growing season, perhaps the skilled labor, agricultural labor. You can, for example, a big export of Canada is financial knowledge to other parts of the world where they don't have the same educational system. The global partnership, partnering with other individuals or businesses and getting access to their investment. It's natural resources, but it's also labor, and it's also capital. So, Tata Steel is an Indian company. There's lots of construction happening in India, but there's not a lot of steel, so it has extensive mining operations in Quebec and Newfoundland. Here's a site of one of their mining sites near the Newfoundland border, which they use to extract ore, which then goes into buildings in India and other parts of the world. Now, trade can be complicated. Just to go back to that starting story about the difficulty of getting that trade agreement with the UK and Europe. So one of the biggest holdups for the negotiations between Canada and Europe was the region of Wallonia. So in Belgium, there's two different regions. There's Flanders, there's Wallonia. They both have to agree for something to become law. So there were farmers who made certain dairy products, for example, that are also being made in Canada, who were worried about, Canadian products entering their market. And it caused a big holdup. It actually held up the big agreement for a couple of years. Term to know. Global product is a standard item that's offered in the same format in all countries. So, when you go and ask for Coke, it's going to be the same anywhere in the world. It's just recognizable. Those like Levi's jeans, a Rolex watch, something that's, very, very, standard, it's known around the world and everyone enjoys it around the world. We would call that a global product. Another term, a domestic transaction. So when every part of the item has been produced in one country and the final sale to the consumer happens in that country, it's a domestic transaction. So Canada Goose would have a factory at Eglinton and Caledonia Road. They make their coats there. It gets shipped to the Canada Goose store at Yorkdale, and you might go and buy a coat there. That is an example of a domestic transaction. Now, the opposite would be an international transaction, and they're a lot more common. If you were to look at the labels around your house or around your home and the labels that you're wearing, you'll see lots of different countries. So, an example of that would be Nike makes a lot of shoes in Vietnam. And so then they get shipped to Canada, and then we purchase them there. So an American company makes them in an export processing zone in Vietnam, and then they're sold at the Jordan store in Toronto. The global economy is the economy of the whole world. It is calculated, just as all the international exchange of goods and services. Value was 78 trillion in 2014, and I realize now that that's one of the stats that I did not change for this year's course. So you can go and research and see what the total economy is now. What's Canada's share of that? Well, um, I changed this link, and perhaps I'm sharing the wrong presentation. I was just researching this. So Canada actually, uh, this is 2019. I just did not change that one title when I was researching it earlier this evening. But 447 billion is Canada's exports, and that is up to 2019. And that's a lot of motor vehicle parts in southern Ontario, machinery, aircraft parts, telecommunications, certain chemicals, fertilizers like from Saskatchewan, wood pulp and timber from BC, crude petroleum, natural gas from Alberta, electricity from Ontario and Quebec, aluminum from Northern Ontario. These are all some of our exports. So it was 447 billion in 2019. And then we imported for 453 billion. So there was a slight trade deficit in 2019. And that was included some specific machinery and equipment that was needed. Again, motor vehicles. The reason that's on both lists is the supply chain is integrated. So a car part might be made in the US and then shipped to Canada to be assembled into a vehicle. Or part of the vehicle is assembled in Canada and then it's shipped to Mexico to be finally assembled. Crude oil from the oil sands is sent via pipeline to be processed in the Gulf of Mexico. We need a lot of electricity, so it goes along both sides of the border. There's often, Ontario will sell electricity to New York State and, buy it later. Durable consumer goods, that's, things that we use, that last, like a long time, like pieces of furniture. So what was the final story about the trade agreement? Well, on October 30th, 2016, Justin Trudeau finally signed the Canada-EU trade agreement, and the UK, which was our second biggest trading partner after the US, starting just recently, last couple of weeks, the Canada-UK trade continuity agreement became active, and it extended many of the same trading agreements that were in CETA to the UK, and allowed that relationship to continue unobstructed. The details were sort of finalized throughout 2020, and it took effect on January 1st. And those are the benefits of trade. So to be successful, you would be able to explain 5 reasons why a company might trade. That could include access to markets, that could include access to resources, greater quality of goods, greater quantity of goods, and also cheaper labor, and be able to think off the top of your head about some of the examples